the boat?
You've just seen it. Police body cam footage capturing the moment officers step aboard a quiet white motor cruiser drifting off the coast of New South Wales. But this wasn't a routine inspection. As they open up the hull, row after row of tightly wrapped bricks come into view, stacked, sealed, and worth hundreds of millions. Inside that boat, over a ton of high-grade cocaine hidden in plain sight. This wasn't some chaotic cartel shootout or a back-alley drug deal. It was a carefully planned smuggling operation, unfolding on the open sea, under the illusion of a calm coastal journey. The boat had been bought just days earlier with cash. It left Sydney under surveillance, cruised north past sleepy towns, and was finally intercepted about 9 nautical miles off Nambucca Heads. What followed was a coordinated takedown. 2 men arrested at sea, 3 more caught trying to flee on land. In total, 5 people now face serious charges, and police say this might only be one piece of a much larger transnational crime puzzle. This is the story of Australia's $623 million cocaine sting, a quiet operation on the water that turned into one of the country's biggest drug busts in recent memory. It started with a boat, a modest 13-meter motor cruiser, purchased in late April 2025 in Sydney's Sutherland Shire. The transaction was fast, and the payment was made in cash. For investigators already watching the edges of Australia's underworld, this was a red flag. The boat's sudden purchase, without a clear purpose or travel plan, drew attention. Within days, law enforcement had eyes on it, both physically and digitally. Authorities had formed a covert operation known as Strike Force Blaine, a joint effort by the New South Wales Police Force and the Australian Federal Police, AFP, focused on dismantling organized criminal attempts to smuggle drugs through Australia's extensive coastline. With the boat under quiet surveillance, investigators began piecing together the movements of the individuals associated with it. A rotating group of young men in their 20s and 30s, some already known to police. Between April 28th and early May, the vessel made its way northward along the coast. Police monitored its movements from land, sea, and air. Intelligence suggested a major shipment was expected, and the remote waters off New South Wales's mid-north coast provided the perfect location for a handover, far from watchful eyes, but close enough to slip back undetected. But police weren't watching from afar. They were preparing. Quietly, methodically, they coordinated the operation. Units from the New South Wales Police Marine Area Command were placed on standby. The AFP tracked digital activity and encrypted communications. As the boat cruised toward Nambucca Heads, authorities closed in. Then, on the morning of May 9th, 2025, just after sunrise, the time came. Roughly 9 nautical miles offshore, the vessel was intercepted by police. Officers boarded with cameras rolling, weapons holstered, but ready. What they found would confirm months of suspicion. More than 1,100 tightly packed bricks of cocaine, weighing over a ton. The sea was quiet on the morning of May 9th, 2025. Smooth waters stretching out from the coast of Nambucca Heads, giving no hint of what was about to unfold. But for the NSW Police Marine Area Command, this was the moment they'd been waiting for. Weeks of planning, surveillance, and coordination had all led to this operation. Somewhere about 9 nautical miles off the coast, a white 13-meter motor cruiser was steadily making its way south, unaware that it was being tracked from above, from the shoreline, and from the waves. The order was given. Interception units moved in swiftly, flanking the boat with precision. Officers boarded the vessel, body-worn cameras capturing every movement. This wasn't a high-speed chase. It was clinical, deliberate, and controlled. The 2 men on board, later identified as 24-year-old and 26-year-old Australian nationals, didn't attempt to resist. From their body language, It was clear. They knew the game was over. What the officers found inside confirmed their months-long suspicions. Hidden within multiple compartments were hundreds of shrink-wrapped packages. The haul was impressive, not in its chaos, but in its cold efficiency. The blocks were packed tight, each one encased in plastic, some bearing markings or logos, possible indicators of overseas cartels. They were wedged into almost every available space of the vessel, a floating warehouse disguised as a recreational cruiser. As police cataloged the discovery, the scale became clear. A total of 1,110 blocks were recovered, with a combined weight of 1.039 tons of high-purity cocaine. The estimated street value? More than $623.4 million, enough to make this one of the largest cocaine seizures in Australian maritime history. Once secured, the motor cruiser was escorted to shore under armed supervision. The illicit cargo was removed and transferred to a secure AFP holding facility for forensic testing and cataloging. Officers used protective gear to handle the bricks, ensuring no contamination as evidence was logged for what would likely become a lengthy court process. The two men from the boat were formally arrested and transported to Coffs Harbour Police Station, where they were processed under the watch of Strike Force Blaine detectives. But the operation wasn't finished. Police had intelligence suggesting the men weren't acting alone, and while the vessel floated offshore, the rest of the group was already moving. Surveillance teams were tracking them inland, preparing to strike. While officers secured the cocaine-laden boat offshore, Strike Force Blaine was already in motion on land. The operation had been months in the making, and this wasn't just about intercepting a vessel. It was about dismantling an entire network. Intelligence had pointed to at least 3 more suspects involved in the smuggling attempt, and police weren't about to let them slip away. The land-based team had eyes on several vehicles believed to be linked to the operation. Just as the boat was intercepted at sea, these cars were tracked heading away from Southwest Rocks, a coastal town about 40 kilometers from the seizure point. Acting on pre-coordinated timings, officers from the New South Wales Police and Australian Federal Police moved in. 3 men, aged 28, 29, and 35, were arrested during 2 separate vehicle stops. No firearms were drawn, and no resistance was reported, but the atmosphere was tense. Police knew these weren't just joyriders or small-time dealers. These were alleged players in a coordinated transnational cocaine smuggling ring. Each man was taken into custody and transported to Coffs Harbour Police Station, the same destination as their 2 associates intercepted at sea. With all 5 men in custody, Strike Force Blaine executed search warrants at multiple residential properties in the greater Newcastle area. These homes, in quiet suburban streets, were allegedly used as staging points in the broader plan. Forensic investigators moved in, collecting phones, electronic devices, encrypted communication tools, and clothing for DNA testing. Each item seized would later help build the case, tying suspects not just to each other, but to the logistics of the vessel, the route it traveled, and the shipment it carried. According to police, all 5 men were part of a coordinated group with specific roles. Some sourced the boat. Others helped plan the journey. One was allegedly the security man, tasked with watching for police interference, encrypted communications, believed to be connected to syndicates overseas. The arrests weren't just reactive, they were surgical. Authorities had allowed the operation to play out just long enough to catch every key player in the act. Now, with a ton of cocaine off the market and 5 men behind bars, it was time to move from surveillance to prosecution. But what they had uncovered was just the surface. The real question loomed: who was behind it all? As details emerged about the arrested men, a clearer picture of the smuggling crew came into focus. These weren't hardened cartel veterans or international fugitives, at least not on the surface. They were Australians from different walks of life, each allegedly playing a defined role in one of the most audacious drug importation attempts in recent memory. Among the 5 charged was Cooper Hollingworth, a 29-year-old electrician from Cardiff, in the Hunter region of New South Wales. According to police, he was linked to the group through encrypted communications and financial movements. He'd recently made cash withdrawals and had allegedly been present during key planning stages. When he appeared in court, his legal team claimed he was merely tagging along, but police insisted he was an active participant. He later applied for bail, which was denied. Then there was Rodney James Hill, a 35-year-old mechanic from Newcastle. Police allege he acted as a logistics coordinator, a security man of sorts. Court documents suggested he was responsible for keeping an eye out for law enforcement activity and had used encrypted phones to monitor the boat's progress. In his court appearance, Hill's defense downplayed his role, claiming he never set foot on the vessel. But prosecutors argued his presence on land was no accident. The 2 younger men arrested on the vessel, aged 24 and 26, were less publicly identified, but police described them as in-transport couriers. They were allegedly chosen for their ability to crew the vessel and stay under the radar during its voyage up the coast. Police say these men were found directly handling the cargo and had no legitimate explanation for the boat's presence off Nambucca Heads. The 5th man, Chaiwat Thipsing, a 28-year-old with dual Thai Australian citizenship, was suspected of having overseas connections. Authorities believe he may have been the point of contact for the Source Syndicate, potentially tying the Australian operation to international suppliers. All 5 were charged with supplying a prohibited drug in a large commercial quantity and participating in a criminal group contributing to criminal activity. Each faced Parramatta Bail Court on May 10, 2025, where magistrates denied bail due to the seriousness of the alleged offenses and the risk of flight. Their next scheduled appearance was set for July 15th at Coffs Harbour Local Court, where the full extent of the evidence, including surveillance footage, intercepted communications, forensic results, and vessel tracking data, would begin to unfold in court. But even with these men in custody, authorities were clear. This case was far from over. Behind every frontline smuggling crew is a deeper hierarchy, and Strike Force Blaine was only beginning to uncover the layers. With the 5 suspects behind bars, investigators from Strike Force Blaine turned their focus to what they had gathered, not just the cocaine, but the devices, documents, and digital trails left behind. The goal was simple: trace the network beyond the boat. Inside the seized properties in Newcastle and surrounding suburbs, police found encrypted mobile phones, burner SIM cards, cash in vacuum-sealed bags, and handwritten notes, some of which outlined what appeared to be maritime coordinates. Every phone, hard drive, and tablet was sent for forensic analysis. Specialists from the Australian Federal Police's digital forensics team worked around the clock to unlock devices and extract communications, photos, and app data that might reveal who was giving orders. Authorities were especially interested in encrypted messaging apps like Signal and Wicker, which were commonly used by criminal syndicates to coordinate drop points and vessel movements. Early forensic reports suggested that at least one suspect had been in contact with a foreign-based account known to law enforcement, hinting at possible ties to South American suppliers. Meanwhile, financial investigators launched a separate track. Using transaction histories, vehicle purchase records, and surveillance footage from ATMs, they began to map out how the boat was funded and how cash was being moved through the system. One suspect, according to police, had withdrawn tens of thousands of dollars in cash in the days leading up to the vessel's departure. Another was linked to a business account that showed irregular cash deposits and electronic payments tied to marine equipment. The boat itself became a key piece of evidence. Purchased in late April 2025, it was bought for cash from a seller in Sydney's Sutherland Shire. The sale was rapid. No haggle, no paperwork delays. Authorities believe the boat was specifically chosen for its size and layout, ideal for both coastal travel and concealed cargo. Once acquired, it was retrofitted with modified storage compartments, which later housed more than 1,100 bricks of cocaine. Customs and Border Protection officials were brought in to review whether the vessel had entered or exited international waters during its journey. However, GPS logs from law enforcement surveillance indicated the cocaine was likely transferred onto the boat from another vessel while out at sea, a method commonly known as drop and pick. Strike Force Blaine believed this was part of a larger operation, not just one shipment, but one of several. As more messages were decrypted and financial trails untangled, the scale of what they had stumbled upon became clear. A professional network exploiting Australia's vast coastline to run high-volume, high-risk shipments under the radar. The seizure off Nambucca Heads was just one event, but it spoke volumes. More than a ton of cocaine, packed with military-like precision, ferried along Australia's east coast in a vessel that blended in with everyday marine traffic. For law enforcement, it was a reminder of how exposed the country's maritime borders truly are, and how far criminal syndicates are willing to go. Australia has more than 34,000 kilometers of coastline, a dream for smugglers who understand how to exploit gaps in surveillance. According to AFP Assistant Commissioner Stephen Demetto, criminal organizations have begun shifting tactics. They're using low-profile vessels, encrypted comms, and crews with local knowledge, he said in a press briefing. It's not about one big cartel anymore. It's networks, linked across continents, using Australia's geography against us. Strike Force Blaine was formed with this reality in mind, a multi-agency task force combining state police, the AFP, the NSW Crime Commission, Border Force, and intelligence analysts. The goal wasn't just to intercept one boat, but to map and dismantle a growing maritime drug route, one shipment at a time. The Nambucca bust highlighted the professionalization of these networks. The boat had been purchased with clean money, retrofitted with hidden compartments, and crewed by individuals who, at first glance, had minimal criminal history. The operation was quiet. No flashy cars, no gunfire, just logistics and timing. It was designed to go unnoticed. But the stakes are enormous. That single shipment, 1.039 tons of cocaine, represented over 1 million individual doses, destined for city streets and rural towns alike. Its street value was pegged at $623.4 million, but the real cost would have been far higher. Increased violence, community addiction, and the expansion of criminal control in suburban areas. In the aftermath of the arrests, police issued a clear warning. They believe other crews are already planning similar runs, and not just on the East Coast. Intelligence suggests Western Australia, Northern Queensland, and even Tasmania are being targeted as future entry points for drugs. The 5 men arrested in May now face the full weight of the law. Their court proceedings will unfold over the coming months, a process that may uncover more names, more shipments, and deeper connections to international suppliers. But the message from police is firm. This isn't the end. It's a snapshot of an evolving war, one fought not just in courtrooms, but across the waves, in coastal towns, and in the shadows of international trade. And for every boat that's caught, authorities know there may be another still floating just beyond the horizon.